Welcome back to the stories that shape us. Each week, we take a deep dive into the transformation and moments of pivotal decisions that shape who we ultimately are today. As always, I'm your host, Brock Doty, and I am super passionate about sharing stories that not only inspire, but motivate and challenge us to grow. So I'm happy that you have joined us each week as we continue to sit down with incredible guests who have faced life's toughest challenges and come out stronger, offering practical insights and powerful takeaways. Today, we are on episode 7 of our podcasting journey together. I'm so thrilled to have a great friend of mine joining us for this episode. It's my honor to introduce Robert Hunt, co-author of the bold and honest book, Nobody Cares Until You Do. So buckle up because this is about to be a powerful conversation about self-accountability and determination. In this powerful conversation, Robert is going to share his radical journey to financial freedom, one that took them from being buried in under $90,000 in debt to achieving true financial independence. But it wasn't an easy road to get there. The road that Robert embarked on with his wife Kathy has some pivotal moments that has shaped his family's journey and the decision that ultimately redefined their understanding of personal responsibility. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the core principles from his book and have a conversation around the practical insights on how to shift from having a victim mentality to a victor mindset. If you've ever felt trapped in your own circumstances or struggled with taking ownership of your actions, this is the episode for you. I've known Robert for about 2 years now, and I can assure you that Robert's story will inspire you to embrace on accountability in a way that you never thought was possible. It can lead to a life unparalleled freedom and empowerment. So sit back and listen as we explore on what true accountability looks like, not the kind that you run from, but the kind that sets you free. Robert, welcome to the Stories That Shape Us. I'm so grateful that you could take the time out of your busy schedule to join me and share your powerful story with the audience listening to this podcast today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, absolutely. Before we get into selling the house and the turning point of the book, before all of that, I want to rewind. Can you take us back to the beginning on what did life look like for you and Kathy before everything had changed?
Well, I think it's like most Americans, we kept busy working and growing our business. I had started doing CEO peer groups back in 2013, and I never had been a business owner before. And so I didn't have any money saved aside to go and start my own company. I just felt passionate about it and jumped right into it. I actually had a career in marketing and sales leadership. And when I heard about peer groups, I just knew that's what I needed to do for a living. So I jumped into it in 2013. It was a slow build. And year after year of growing it a little bit at a time, we ended up getting into debt. And we lived in the Frisco area and had a lovely home and wanted to keep having that home, but I wasn't making the money I used to make. So we burned through all of our savings and burned through our retirement fund. And then we started stocking up debt and just saying to government every year, hey, I'll cut you a check next year. And we do like most people do. You just kind of kick the can down the road a little bit longer, thinking that maybe next year it'll get better. Maybe next year it'll get better. And we kept saying that all the time, and it got worse every year, actually. And so, uh, although we were enjoying life and having fun, we weren't owning our life. We were just looking at one area, which was the lifestyle we wanted to live and doing the things we wanted to do and enjoying that. But we weren't being thoughtful about the debt that we had. So that led us to where at that point in 2019 where we decided we need to change, and that's where it all turned around.
Absolutely. What was it that you were chasing and like what pressures were you facing back in California? And what did accountability mean to you back then?
Well, I thought I was very accountable. We mistake the word accountable with responsible. Responsible is you're doing something. You have a job. Someone gives you a paycheck. What do? You go to work. That's the responsible thing. You got kids. You end up with kids. So now you got to feed them. That's responsible, right? Accountable is proactive. Accountable says, this is the life I want to live. I'm going to do these things to live the life I want. And most people are responsible, but they're claiming it's accountable and they're not. I mean, accountable would say, look, I don't make as much money as I should to have the life that I'm living right now. I need to change my life. I have kids. I know they're going to grow up to rebel. They're going to grow up to want to be their own person. What foundational things do I need to pour into their lives? That's proactively creating what you hope to get at the end. Well, we weren't being that. We ignored problems in our marriages and our health, and we blamed God for why things weren't going the way that we wanted to instead of owning it. And money became all that we focused on, how much we had and what to do with it. And then when we didn't have enough, how to worry about that. And an idol is anything that takes your eyes off of God, where you put more time and attention on that than you do God. And our money, or lack thereof, was all of our attention. It was a constant quest. And then you get into debt and you start thinking, how am I going to maintain this? And how am I going to pay my debt? And how am I going to keep ahead of it? And that became another thing that we thought and were consumed with. So I don't think we were being accountable. Really, we were being very responsible. And I think most of the world is responsible. But real accountability means you own it. And if you own it, you plan for it. You make changes, you adjust, you sacrifice because you own it. And in light of what you really want, you're willing to make the changes proactively to live the life you want. We weren't doing that before.
Wow, that is so powerful. And I know a lot of listeners, including myself, can relate. Just trying to hold it all together, keep up appearances, and feeling like we're drowning deep down inside. Ultimately, what was the breaking point that you had to sell the house, and how did that even come up in the conversation?
Well, at the beginning of 2019, my beautiful wife Kathy and I were having our annual planning session, and we recognized we weren't enjoying our lives. We weren't living the life we wanted. And what we really wanted at the heart of our marriages was to please the Lord. And we really had lost that because we were spending so much time anxious and worried, and then we'd blame God for that. When you blame God, you're mad at God. And so God hasn't been doing a good job for me because he didn't give me everything I want, like a spoiled child. And so that was affecting our relationship with God. And so at the beginning of the 2019, we said, look, if for some reason God doesn't bless us, which means give us enough money to get us out of debt, then we're going to sell the house and start over. And that wasn't an easy decision. We talked about it. Like, what else could we do? We had looked at Dave Ramsey's philosophies of getting out of debt, and we had talked to a counselor about how to do that. But we thought, well, we've got equity in the house. We could just reset. We could do that. So all year long, we worked really hard to try and make money to grow the business. Maybe this would be the year it took off. It did not. It was just a normal year, but certainly not enough to get you out of $90,000 in debt. And so in September, I got vertigo. And I'd never had vertigo before, but it's like where you're dizzy, constantly dizzy. You can't lay down. You're spinning around the room. You sit up, you feel dizzy. It's just completely disoriented. You couldn't focus. I couldn't do anything. It was miserable. And all the doctors I went to, none of them could figure out why. And it finally went away after 16 days. But in the middle of that, I said, Kathy, if I have vertigo the rest of my life, we're screwed. How are we going to manage $90,000 in debt when I can't work? We're never going to get ahead of this. So when God finally took it away in the mid part of September, we realized, okay, that must be a sign from God. Man, we need to pull the trigger and do this thing. And so we did. We did. We decided right then and there we're going to sell the house, contacted a real estate agent, and we started the process to sell it.
Wow. So that was back in 2019. In
Yeah.
2020, you wrote your very first book, Nobody Cares Until You Do. 22, sorry. Um, I think the title of that book just hits hard. What was it that compelled you to partner with Salem and write a book to be vulnerable enough to share your struggles with the world?
Yeah. In By 2020, we had paid off all of our debt when the world shut down with COVID, and we were debt free in April. And so there was a lot of peace that was going on, and we started looking at the rest of our lives and figuring, this is not the way we want to live. Let's fix our marriage. Let's work on our health. Let's work on our relationship with God. Let's get it back to the way we always wanted it to be. And we walked that journey for a couple years. And I'll tell you, the obedience to get out of debt brought incredible blessings. My business doubled during the year of COVID when everybody was trying to survive. My business doubled. and it doubled again the next year. And so I just believe that God was saying, okay, thanks for your obedience. Let me take care of you, like he's always wanted to. And so through that journey, I realized I don't think people understand what life could really look like when you own it. When you don't own your life, you're a victim. Everything's against you, everything's happening to you. But when you own it, you get this amazing power that allows you to change everything: your marriage, your faith, your health, your finances. Everything is an option. There's nothing off the table. And so we walk through that. I was really stirred by this principle of accountability, and Salem and I used to talk about it for hours. He joked, "You should write a book," and I thought, "There's no way I'm going to write a book." And he said, "Well, I'll write it with you." So, with his encouragement and support, and frankly, his wisdom, he's very articulate, he's a very wise man. And I like the way he sees things. And so together we would write outlines and tell stories and get it all done. And we just realized we weren't going to get it done after spending many Saturdays having hours of planning. And we're not authors, so we hired a publisher and we gave them all of our guidance and notes and worked with a ghostwriter. She was fantastic, and we wanted it done. We wanted to bless the world. It wasn't like I needed this big ego pat to go, I wrote a book. Well, I co-authored a book with Salem, but the goal is to change people's lives, not to be famous authors. And so we got it done. And in 22, it came to the market, and it is changing people's lives. And we are very proud of the work that we did because it's a powerful book.
Absolutely. And now you're helping others wake up with that same truth. What would you say some of the biggest excuses or mindsets that keep people stuck? And how do you help them break free, whether it be in your CEO peer groups or within feedback from your book that you've gotten over the years?
I see a lot of common elements, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or a CEO of a company or a student in college. There's four things that hold you back as a victim. The first one is when you see a problem and you see an issue and you're dealing with the accountability aspect of it. The first thing you do is you blame. You blame something, and it just makes you mad at them, but it doesn't change anything. And if that doesn't work, you make an excuse. And that excuse really just stops any initiative to try and change anything, because those two things really hold most people back: blame and excuse. And if that doesn't work, then we just say, well, I can't do anything about it. There's nothing I can do. I can't sell my house. That's ridiculous. Well, yeah, you can. But instead of saying I can't, you should say I won't. I won't do that. I didn't want to sell my house. I loved my house. It was huge. It had a movie theater upstairs. It had tons of room. It was beautiful, but we couldn't afford it. And so I could sell it. So now that became an opportunity. And then the last thing that holds us back is we just wait and hope. We'll make minimum payments on our credit cards, hoping that I'll get a job someday that'll pay me more money to get ahead of it. But in the meantime, it just keeps growing and growing. You keep putting more money on it. You're never getting ahead of it. And it just gets worse and worse. You don't deal with those relationships that are struggling or that are broken. You don't fix your health. You don't think about your relationship with God. And it's just everything's spinning and getting worse and worse. And when you finally get to a place in your life where you go, wait, nobody cares. Nobody cares if I'm fat, broke, unhappy in my marriage, angry at God, have a crappy job. Nobody cares until you do. And when you care enough to do something about it, you have the power to do something about it. And everyone else has got their own junk. Nobody's going to step up and fix your problems. The government's not responsible for how much money you spend. Your boss isn't responsible for how you live your life. You are. And when you own that, though, instead of feeling like it's a heavy load, it's actually freedom, because I can do something about it. When I have all the power and responsibility, I can change everything. And to me, that's very encouraging, very hopeful.
I agree. I love that. Um, I want to ask you this, Robert. Going back to your book, Nobody Cares Until You Do, what's the one chapter or moment that was the hardest for you to write just because it was so personal, like you felt like you were talking to yourself?
Hmm. Gosh, all of it was awkward. I mean, there was many times we were writing this book going, are we going to tell people that we got $90,000 in debt? I mean, that's humiliating. Um, Having to share some of the struggles with the change that we made, and not make my wife look cold or uncaring. But my wife had built this house, this home we had created. It was her identity in a lot of ways. And then just to turn around and sell it, I'm like, well, it's just a house. Let's move on. Well, it was her home. It was where she raised us and cared for us and loved us, and to her there was identity in that house. So I think talking about that was difficult because I didn't want to ever make Kathy look like she was petty or selfish. And so telling stories about how it was hard. I think that although my wife completely supported this effort and we were unified around the desire to serve the Lord, it was still very hard for her to sell the house. And hey, she had to sell a bunch of shoes. She had to give up shoes. There was nowhere to put shoes in this house. We still have two white cabinets in the garage that are full of her shoes, but she gave up tons of shoes when we moved here. And the clothes, we got one little closet we share. We used to have a walk-in closet that was huge. Man, we're splitting. I have this much, and she has the rest of it, and then the other closets and stuff. But she got rid of a ton of things. I mean, dishes in the kitchen. Our kitchen was one-fourth the size now of what it used to be. So even pots and pans and cool appliance, all that stuff, we had to get rid of it all. So I think I ripped out of her hand a lot of the things that were really important to her and her identity. I got to take my tools. I still have a shed where I still got wrenches and pliers and stuff. I didn't have that much, so it wasn't that hard. But the things I cared about, it all came with me. So I think those are awkward moments of just having to be vulnerable. But our desire is that people would know there's a better life when you own it. God desires that we walk with Him and that we not be complainers. He died on the cross for us. He gave us eternal life. You're going to spend eternity in heaven. And even if you live to be 100 years old here, it's not even a fraction of time of what you're going to spend in eternity with Jesus. And all you do is bitch and moan about how you don't have this kind of car or this kind of house or this kind of job. And that's not what He redeemed us for. He redeemed us to walk with Him in obedience and to be thankful and to be giving to the world around us. And we spend all of our time building our kingdom instead of building His kingdom on earth. And we really came to grips with that. That was the mindset we were at. It was all about us. And I don't want to live that way anymore. I like living for Him. That's our passion these days.
Hey man, that's beautiful. I think living for him instead of living for yourself will ultimately make you more happy. And going back to all the shoes, I'm sure there's a woman in every household in America that has more shoes than her husband. And so I can relate to that. Um,
Yeah, certainly.
when you're talking about the move, how the house in Orange County was Kathy's, how did you guys agree upon leaving California, Orange County, California, to going to Frisco, Dallas, Texas?
Well, to be clear, we had moved here in 2010. And it was in 2013 I decided to change careers. So we'd already been here for a couple of years when we moved from California to Texas. And I started this new business in 2013. And it was from 2013 to 2020, 2019 that took us about 6 years to screw up our life pretty bad with our finances. So we were doing it here. And again, I think Kathy, she totally supported the whole effort. I just think uh, she did all she could to help us reach our goals. But I felt as a man that I had failed because I didn't take care of my family. I felt like as a man, I let my wife down because I didn't provide a safe place for her and to give up her home. It made me feel very sad and like a bit of a loser. But I know that also she understands my role in our relationship is I'm supposed to help her become a better woman. She's supposed to help me become a better man. And so together we help each other to be able to be used by God for his purposes. And so going through these kind of humbling and changing our mindsets things, that's my job as a husband is to do the hard things in our family and to say we're not going to live like this in debt. We're going to live a modest lifestyle where we can be focused on things together and serving the Lord and not being panicked and stressed over money. And she supports that, but I take that responsibility very seriously. I don't know if I answered your
Absolutely.
question.
Yep, you did 100%.
Okay.
Would you say, what would you say to someone listening that is in that rock bottom stage in life? That space that you potentially were in. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but maybe those people that are listening that are at rock bottom are thinking that there's no way out. What would you say to them today, right now?
Yeah, don't wait till you get to rock bottom. You have hope. You have the opportunity while you still have the ability to make decisions. I know people who have actually hit rock bottom, drugs or alcohol that ruined their lives, where they were physically immobile in a hospital trying to survive another overdose. That is rock bottom. But in my life, I've gone through a divorce I've lost my job, been out of a job for a year. I went through a bankruptcy because of that divorce. I ended up moving from California to here to start my life over. I've been through all kinds of challenges, but at the end of the day, I never felt God ever turned his back on me. It was just all the bad decisions that I was making, and I needed to learn to own that. So I would say if you're not happy with your life today, do something about it. That's why we put a satisfaction assessment in the book. We want people to stop and step back and really declare honestly, how satisfied are you in your personal life and your professional life? And be honest, not in light of, well, I've given up my marriage, it's never going to be any better than it is today. No, what was it going to look like when you got married? What in your vision of your mind, what was it going to look like when you had your first kid? How would the vision of starting this business look like the day you started the company? And then compare it to where it is now. And if you're not satisfied, which in most things in life we're not, then what are you going to do about it? And that's where the blame, excuse, saying I can't, or wait and hope kicks in. But if you can press past that to the point of saying, wait, nobody cares. What do I want my life to look like? What can I do about it? There's a lot. And then start that journey. That's what the second half of the book is. That's where you say, okay, what's the reality? Embrace the suck, find a solution and make it happen. And that's, I mean, it's very simple. It's not like we created something new. We just put it together in a book that helps you use it like an instruction manual on how to stop being a victim and own it and live the life you really want.
Absolutely. Robert, these last 2 years of just knowing you and reading your book and knowing your story has truly been a wake up call for me and has shifted my perspective on self discipline and accountability in my own life. So I just want to personally say thank you for being real
Thank you.
and for choosing ownership and for turning that into something that can help so many other people. Um, where can people connect with you or find a copy of your book? Nobody cares until you do.
Yeah. Well, we have it on all the places where you buy books, like Amazon and Target and Walmart and all that stuff. But we'd rather you buy it from us because we can make a little more money when you buy it from us. But more importantly, we'll sign it and we'll send out a copy to you. And we'd like to have you in our community. So when we're doing a workshop in your area, you can come to our workshop. Also, we want to hear your story. We read every single email we get. We want to see your satisfaction assessment and understand why you would rate it the way you rate it and talk to you and hear what's going on and be there to support you because we care. And we're writing these stories, this book to change people's lives. So go to nobodycaresbook.com. That's where you can find our book. You can buy a copy of our book, and you can talk to us and send us information. And then, of course, any other book buying places you like to favor. I get lots of Audible books on Amazon, and our Audible book will be coming out in about a month. Salem and I recorded all the audio in the last couple months, and now we just have to approve it, and we'll get it loaded up into an audio book soon. Maybe next month, maybe May, but it's coming. We've already recorded, so it'll be there soon.
Hey, that's awesome, guys. You heard it here first from Robert himself. We'll drop all of that in the show notes for everyone listening. We'll drop the link so you guys can find that easier. And if this conversation with Robert has challenged you, moved you, or helped you see life through a new lens, I encourage you to share it with somebody else because accountability doesn't trap you, it frees you. Lastly,
That's
as we wrap up here, Robert, I want to open up the floor for you. Any final thoughts that we didn't really touch on? Anything that you want to leave our listeners with to take with them today?
you know, I want to encourage people not to be lazy. I think that's a harsh word. Nobody would want to be identified as lazy. And we would make all kinds of excuses that justify why we're not doing this or that. But lazy is when you know you should do something or you can do something, you don't. When you know you shouldn't do something, you do. And laziness is what robbed me from a lot of years of joy. And by the outside, as everyone would look at my life, I was a very successful businessman. I had a house with a wife and kids, and all these things looked good, but I was not living the life I really wanted. And that's lazy. So if you're looking at your life and you're saying today, I'm not living the life I want, whether that's your faith, your health, your finances, your marriage, your career, whatever, own it and don't be lazy and say, well, I'll work on it later, or I'm busy, or I can't do anything about it. Those are all lies. And you stay in the role of a victim and you're robbing yourself of the joy that God has died for you to have. So don't be lazy. Be determined today to be the person God created you to be. with the opportunities that he gave you and to give him a good return starting today.
Amen. Well said, my friend. Well, I'm going to wrap up here with a 10-minute spiel here, and then we can get out of here. How's that sound?
Sounds awesome.
Alrighty. Well, Robert, again, thank you for being here, taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you're a busy man, so every minute with you, I don't take for granted. And so now that we've heard Robert's incredible journey, I want to take a step back and reflect on the powerful lessons that he shared in his book, as well as on this podcast today. Robert and his family were buried in under $90,000 in debt. But instead of staying stuck or waiting for someone to come along and fix things, they took full accountability. They weren't lazy, and they made the difficult decision to sell their home and face the facts, fix the truth that their financial reality was in a decline and it was time to start fresh. That is true ownership of your situation. One of the visuals Robert uses in his book, Nobody Cares Until You Do, that really stood out to me was the idea of facing a mountain. Because we all have mountains in our life, whether it's debt, a tough relationship, health issues, or even a battle with our own mindset. And often these mountains may seem impossible to climb because we stand at the base of them and we look up at them to wonder, how will we ever make it to the top? But I'll let you in on a little secret. That mountain will always feel impossible until we start climbing. We can choose to stay at the bottom, staring up at it, complaining about how hard it is, or complaining that we can't take that first step. Or we can begin the climb and take that first step. Because it's not about waiting for the mountain to move, it's about us moving forward one step at a time. And Robert touched on it briefly today, embracing the suck. And I just love that idea because that phrase, it cuts through the fluff, cuts through the BS. It gets straight to the heart of the matter. And embracing the suck means accepting the journey isn't going to be easy and it's not going to be comfortable, but it will be necessary to move forward. Robert also talks about another important principle in his book about taking ownership for your decisions. It's so easy for us to point fingers when things go wrong, as Robert pointed out earlier. But true freedom comes from when we stop blaming others and take full responsibility for where we are, where we're going, and who we're with. And that is something that truly stood out to me in his book because it's not about owning the good decisions, it's about owning the bad ones as well. When we take full ownership of our past, we unlock the power to change our future. Another key principle that Robert emphasizes is getting comfortable with the discomfort. That can be so difficult for many of us to embrace, but it's something that Robert and his family had to learn to do. Whether it was downsizing their lifestyle by selling their home or leaving shoes in the garage or downsizing the closet and stepping into the unknown, they had to learn that growth doesn't happen when they stay in their comfort zones. It happens when we push ourselves beyond what we think we can handle. Robert and his wife, Kathy, didn't have to wait for the perfect moment or the perfect conditions to start. They didn't wait for the mountain to get any smaller. They embraced the suck and faced their reality head on. Eventually, they took their first steps towards freedom, and in doing so, they made the climb of that mountain. This is the kind of self-accountability that we're talking about today. It's not just about taking responsibility when things are easy or when things are going smoothly, but it's about stepping up and owning it when things are tough, when you are exhausted, and when you feel like giving up. It's in those very moments that the real growth happens. So, I want to ask you out there that is listening today, where are you standing at the foot of the mountain in your own life? What is the one thing that feels impossible to overcome? Maybe it's a financial struggle, a relationship challenge, or even an internal battle that you've been fighting. Whatever it may be, I want to encourage you today to take that first step, embrace the suck, own the climb, and keep moving forward. Because if you're feeling overwhelmed or stuck, Times the hardest part is getting started. I get it. But I tell you this, real transformation doesn't happen when we're waiting for someone else to come along and fix things for us. It happens when we take ownership, when we embrace the suck and start climbing our own mountain, no matter how steep it feels. And the freedom on the other side of that climb is worth every difficult step. So now that you've heard Robert's powerful story, I want to take a moment to reflect on something that can be a game changer for each of us. We have guests every week come on the stories that shape us and speak about their defining moments and how often these moments come from a place of deep self-accountability. It's easy for us to blame others and wait for things to change, but as we learned today, true transformation begins when we take responsibility of ourselves. As you think about Robert's journey, I want to challenge you to reflect on the areas in your life where you may be avoiding self-accountability. Accountability is the key to breaking free of old patterns and stepping into the freedom that is out there waiting for you. In this verse of the week, I'm going to be talking about something that could shift your perspective in your life and allow God's word to speak to your heart. Because we all have a plank in our eye. Whether we see it or not, it's time we address it. Let's just take a few minutes here to reflect on this truth, because the theme of today's episode is accountability. Accountability ultimately starts with you. So I'm going to turn my Bible to Matthew 7, 3 through 5. And in that verse it says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck of your eye,' when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye." That just hits, doesn't it? Jesus isn't condemning us, but he is inviting us to live free. But here's the thing. Freedom starts with accountability. And on this podcast, The Stories That Shape Us, we talk a lot about defining moments, turning points that have changed everything for people. But sometimes the biggest shift doesn't come from something that someone else did. It comes from when we finally stop blaming and start owning. So let me ask you this simple yet serious question. What is the plank in your eye? Maybe it's a habit you're hiding, a resentment you're holding on to, or a mindset that says, "This is just who I am." Maybe it's an unwillingness to forgive or to admit that you're wrong. Whatever it may be, I want you to get honest with yourself for a second. Because when Jesus talks about the plank, he's not talking to them. He's talking to you, to me, to us. And he's not doing this to shame us. He's doing this to set us free. So as we wrap up today's episode, I just want to speak directly to you and take a moment for you, the listener, because you have heard a powerful story from Robert Hunt. Robert and his wife, Kathy, were $90,000 in debt and facing a hard truth. They could have kept up the appearances, stayed in the house, and kept the image alive, but they chose not to. They ultimately said, "We can't keep living like this. We can't keep living this way," and ultimately decided to choose accountability for themselves. They chose to get real with themselves and start over. And that decision, it didn't just lead them out of debt, but it led Robert to write a book that is now impacting lives across the globe. And I've had the chance to read this book myself, and if I can be honest and a little bit vulnerable with you guys for a second, I just want to share something real. This book will completely change who you are because it challenged me as well as convicted me. But ultimately, it lit a fire in me. Because Robert and Salem don't just water everything down to protect our feelings, just like so many things do in today's world. But they speak straight from the heart for us to hear. The plain and simple truth is that they care. And ultimately, you should care too. Because no one is going to care more about your life, your growth, or your future than you. This book is raw, honest, and it's exactly the message that we all need to hear. So if you've been sitting around waiting for someone to come fix your situation, let this be your wake-up call. Let me ask you this. Where in your life do you need to stop waiting and start taking ownership? What story have you been telling yourself that's keeping you stuck? Because I believe with everything in me that your next breakthrough begins with brutal honesty and bold accountability. So if Robert's message today resonated with you, I cannot encourage you enough to pick up a copy of his book, Nobody Cares Until You Do. I've linked the website in the show notes so you can find a copy as well as his website so you can connect with him directly. Read it, share it, and let it challenge the way that you think. And if this episode spoke to you, you don't have to keep it to yourself, because I encourage you to subscribe, leave a review, and refer it to a friend who needs to hear it too. Because you never know how one conversation, one story can shape someone's life. Next week, we'll be switching gears a bit, staying in the same theme of transformation, but we'll be hearing from a young man who once hated school, struggled through high school, and is now finishing up his bachelor's degree in business administration 4 years later. This young man's journey is a journey of growth, perseverance, and determination to keep going even when it's hard. I can't wait for you to hear it. But until then, remember to check out Robert Hunt's book, Nobody Cares Until You Do. Visit his website for more resources, and keep thriving, learning, and shaping your story. If this episode spoke to you, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. This has been The Stories That Shape Us. Join us each week for real stories, real growth, and real impact. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.